Good morning, everyone. We're going to continue with our devotion on knowing God. I thought I'll just talk about a scripture that we take his disciples over the lake of Galilee. And these stories were really meant for our encouragements, and it shows day to day life with Jesus. Jesus' disciples walked with him day to day, and we walk with Jesus day to day. And sometimes we can repeat the same mistakes that we see the disciples making. In Mark chapter 4 and verse 35, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd in verse 36, leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. Now, who initiates this journey? Jesus actually initiated. And when we look at life's journey, we see our lives as there's many things that are initiated by God, ideas that are initiated by God, dreams, visions, certain areas that we think are, as our purpose. It's really initiated by Him. God puts the desire there for us to pursue those things. Let's go on to the other side. But immediately when Jesus utters these words, the disciples, some of them were fishermen, and so they go into fisherman mode. In other words, Jesus, we got this. And they lean on their own skill and their own ability and their own experience because they knew the waters. They knew how to do life. Jesus, you have your place. It's called Sunday morning. We worship you there, and that's where we might leave you. And Monday to Saturday, we go and do our own thing in our own ability and in our own strength. Listen to what happens. After the initiator is there, he says in verse 37, a furious squall, a furious storm came on the waters, and waves broke over the boat, so it was nearly swamped. In verse 38, Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. Jesus actually found no need for himself. He actually just decided to sleep through the journey. His disciples had no need of him. Now that the storm was there and the difficulty was there, the disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And it's very important as we talk about knowing God. Do we really know God? Do we have a desire to know Him? Or do we use God as a get out of jail free card? And we've got to ask ourselves the deep questions. Am I using God as a way to escape difficulties, or am I wanting to know God? Am I in relationship with Jesus Christ? The disciples eventually realized Jesus is in the boat, and they woke him up and they said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Isn't this a classical one? Don't we find ourselves saying similar things, or have found ourselves saying similar things? That when the going gets tough, we blame God and we start doubting His care for us. Self-reliance eventually brings us to the place of feeling insecure. We feel like we don't want to trust God, yet God, the initiator, we've allowed Him to sleep in the boat because we've depended on our own abilities and our own skill. In verse 39, he woke up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and he said, "Quiet, be still." The wind died down, and it was complete calm. What authority Jesus had. What authority God has in our lives. He has the potential to do so much more than He's doing at the moment. Because sometimes we put Him off to sleep because He's watching us doing life rather than us doing life with Him. And in verse 40, he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" I'll come back to that. In verse 41, they were terrified and they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Isn't that a classical question that they're asking about Jesus? Who is this? They've been walking with him for such a long time, but they still don't have a full revelation of who he is. He's a good teacher. He's a good friend, but we didn't realize that he can even quiet the waves. He can even quiet the storms. He can even jump into action in my circumstance. So that when we look at God, we might think He is less powerful than He really is. We don't have a full revelation of His capabilities. I want to go back to verse 39, where He says, "Quiet, be still." And in verse 40, He says, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" What has faith got to do with this here? Jesus couldn't understand. The creator of the universe, was in their boats. Why are they afraid? I mean, just think about it. If the police commissioner was in your house, would you be afraid? Because at the call, he's got a whole squadron of policemen, police forces that can come and rally around you. We got someone greater than the police commissioner living within us. And sometimes we doubt, why are you so afraid? Don't you know who you have in your boat? If we don't really know him, we will constantly be terrified by the various storms that come across us because we lack trust that he has power to save us. Someone said this year, I don't tell God how big my problems are. I tell my problems how big my God is. This can only come from a person that really knows their God. My question is, are you that person?